This episode of the Education Matters podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Mental Health Summit, taking place April 17th to the 18th, 2026 at the Banff Center in Banff, Alberta. I'm your host, Jason Bucheri, and for this special episode, I'm joined once again by the Summit's founder, Dr. Gina Cherkowski. Together, we reflect on last year's gathering and hear directly from attendees who offer a window into how education can meaningfully support mental health and empower learners. So let's get started.
We know stress is a contagion. We know we have increasingly complex times. We now have more students that have anxiety, depression, that are struggling with things like attendance in school. And all of these increasing complexities inside our classroom can't help but take a toll on the big people. So we need to support our teachers, I think, with a bunch of tools to increase their own capacity to care for themselves, as well as to be able to care for the students in front of them. So I think that's actually two different things, and we need to make space for both inside schools today.
Gina Cherkowski, welcome back to the Education Matters podcast. We've been excited to do this one for a long time because it's a review of the Mental Health Summit that we did back in April. And we're pretty excited about what's coming, aren't we?
We are so excited about what's coming. And a lot of exciting things happen both for you and me in the in-between. So it's been nice to catch up before we started recording. But I'm so excited to be sharing what's coming ahead.
Absolutely. And for those watching on the YouTube channel, I have my More Good Day sweater on that I got at the conference from the wonderful Caitlin Jones-Harudi and her team there. So with that, the structure of this podcast is a bit different than what we typically have done in the past, but it's part of the Education Matters partnership with the Mental Health Summit to review the wonderful learning that we did in April and to discuss the Mental Health Summit coming up in 2026. So with that, Gina, do you want to kind of give folks some insight into what's coming?
Absolutely. So save the dates in your calendars. This year's event is April 17th and 18th in Banff at the Banff Center for Art and Creativity. This epic 2-day event has amazing keynote speakers, just like we had last year. So we're super excited this year to announce that we have Dr. Andy Hargreaves as one of our keynotes, Dr. Jean Clinton as one of our keynotes. We also have Dr. Tyler John Bonfett from UBCO as one of our keynotes, and Dr. Julia Ruckledge, who will be coming all the way from New Zealand.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we share all that wonderful info when the podcast drops. But in the meantime, for the returning folks that know all about the Mental Health Summit, I think you're going to be very excited to see what we've put together today. And for those that are new and are exploring ideas and how to impact mental health in schools, I think this will give you a good sense of what the tenor and tone and feel of the conference is about. So with that, Gina, I'm going to share some of the micro interviews we did at the summit, and I'm going to ask you to reflect on some of the interesting and wonderful things that folks have been sharing.
Thank you. I'm excited.
I think schools need to help students, but as well as teachers, be more aware of emotional regulation and start there. I think that many adults are not emotionally regulated and then respond from a place of dysregulation, which then dysregulates kids as well.
The switch that we need to make now is to start to look after the adults. As Dr. Carrington said this morning, look after the adults and they'll be able to look after the kids. But it's a really important piece that schools and systems as a whole have to address and really focus on.
Typically, I think schools should be able to hold some symposium and workshop for both students and staff in order to create the awareness and deepen the awareness into what mental health is all about and how they can explore it for their personal use and how they could also support the people they're working with.
I think schools can play an incredible role in actually supporting students and staff in mental health. Sometimes staff can be the safest person for a student. And so by being able to take care of and be that consistent face for kids, it can sometimes mean a world of difference. And yet for staff, it's really important that we take care of them too, because if they're not able to be well, they cannot lead well.
So, Gina, some pretty awesome responses there. In asking you to reflect on those responses, can I also ask you to give some thought as to how schools can more deeply support mental health and well-being in the day-to-day?
Absolutely. Well, I think it was a compelling message last year at the summit that we need to take care of the big people. And as was mentioned, Dr. Jonah Carrington certainly was talking about that. But in addition to that, there's been a lot of research, like the Kim Schonert-Reichl research of cortisol levels between staff and students. We know stress is a contagion. We know we have increasingly complex times. We now have more students that have anxiety, depression, that are struggling with things like attendance in school, and all of these increasing complexities inside our classroom can't help but take a toll on the big people. So we need to support our teachers, I think, with a bunch of tools to increase their own capacity to care for themselves, as well as to be able to care for the students in front of them. So I think that's actually two different things, and we need to make space for both inside schools today.
Wonderful. And now this next clip that we're going to share turns from the focus on teachers and how schools can support mental well-being and health with students.
Many of our neighbors are fragile. How many of our neighbors, our cousins, are lost in community. And I can see how the impact that it could have on families. Fast forward, I become a teacher, a principal, superintendent, and without your mental health well-being, you simply cannot reach your potential.
The quality of your life matters. The purpose in your life matters. And you can have a great life doing even simple things if your mental health is well and if your physical health is well.
It's so easy to find ourselves just rolling through life day after day rather than choosing with intention how we want to live our life in a way that works for ourselves. And I've experienced that with my own personal burnout, my own personal challenges in life, and seeing the other side of that, where now by living my life with intention, it's such a richer and more fulfilled experience.
When people are at their best, they're going to be able to learn. I mean, our role is to build up individuals and bring them towards their best. And I suppose, on a personal note, to have a complete happy life, you need to be wellness needs to be at the forefront.
Was shared with me years ago by a consultant that students need to be available to learn, and that stayed with me over the years. And mental health is a big part of that. Do students feel safe? Is there something else on their mind? Wrapping around them in that sense is very important, so that they are available to access the curriculum and do the learning that's part of their school day.
So, Gina, we just heard some fantastic responses about how it's necessary for students to have a stable environment where their mental health is a priority in order to be able to learn. How underrated do you think this is when it comes to public education and learning within schools?
Well, I think we definitely need to draw more attention and awareness around this topic. I think when a student is acting out in a classroom, we might see behavior as the issue, but behaviors have a beginning. And it typically is an unmet need. And we need to start taking a look at what are some of the emotional unmet needs, as well as it could be physical or social. We know from research, and in fact, if we look at the Alberta Adolescents Recovery Center, for 33 years, adolescents who are addicted have been getting support and treatment with this program. Over 33 years, they said one thing students have in common when they graduate from that program is that they felt like they didn't fit in, they didn't belong. And so schools need to be authentic places of belonging for all students, that they don't need to change to fit in, but they're seen and heard and accepted and cared for as they are. And that goes a long way to helping students be learning ready in a state where their mind is able to learn because they feel safe, they feel accepted, they feel seen, and they're regulated and their brain is apt and ready for whatever is coming.
Well, fantastic. And now we'll turn to a related area that a lot of our interviewees commented on, and that was on community and mental health.
building community is absolutely essential, both inside the school and even building community after and outside the school for our kiddos. That's all important. So making long-term lifetime connections is critical, but in schools is a place where we can actually teach that, model that, and share that skill set.
Schools are where students spend such a huge bulk of their time, and it's where they really go for learning and for connection, both with other students and with the educators that support them and the administrators at schools as well. So in terms of supporting mental health, I think that educators and administrators in school systems have kind of a responsibility to provide kind of a mental health education for their students.
Well, in 2025 and beyond, I think there should be a primary role, only because of this quote that I came across online, that not every kid comes to school wanting to learn, but every kid comes to school wanting to belong. So only schools can create that belonging by prioritizing mental health.
Well, I think that schools are a hub for the community, for our students. We need to play a key role in supporting students with developing universal strategies and making sure that they feel connected and belong in our community. We need to make sure that we're providing supports along a continuum, so we're connecting kids and families to the help they may need.
The school is not an island. How do we ensure that we're part of the community? And when we have situations where students or staff are not, or leaders who are not in that space, how do we wrap around that from a community perspective? And oftentimes when a child is not in that space, it's also an impact on the family. When the employee is not in a good space, it impacts the family. When a leader's not in a good space, it impacts the family.
So, Gina, a lot of those folks certainly echoed your initial sentiments on community and mental health. Is there a way we can develop a greater sense of community, maybe beyond just schools, that is focused on mental health?
Absolutely. I'm excited to say, I'm a part of some organizations that are already starting to do this work. And because we've seen a gap in the area and we need to have concerted efforts, because this is an all of us initiative. This is everyone's problem. It's everyone's concern. Mental health impacts not just the schools, but our society and our culture. So we need all people on board for the solution. And there are organizations, like I was saying, across different provinces. It looks different. But for example, Converge Mental Health is providing support for not just the schools, but bringing in outside professionals to help support in certain ways and capacities, or at least knowing where resources are that can either support workplace mental health and well-being, community mental health and well-being, and even with schools. And I'm excited to be learning alongside others in communities like that about how we can support one another. Certainly my focus is on the school side, but looking at the broader picture and how we can support one another is absolutely key for this. You know, kids have access to so much these days, and we see things like addiction starting as young as 7 years old. Kids are addicted to online gambling and our digital media. It's really changing and rewiring brains. And we know that this is something we all need to get on board with, including at the policy level, at the school level, at the community level. So working with other organizations is the way that we're going to help solve this, both for schools and for our greater community.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Gina. And one particular segment of the community is addressed in this next clip by our common friend, Adam Turnbull, who made a comment specifically around men and mental health. Let's have a listen to this.
Now able to finally, especially as men, to talk about mental health and mental well-being. And like many other people, I've had impacts in my life where I've lost 2 older cousins to suicide. And so for me, being able to finally, as a man with 2 young children, with a wife, to be able to kind of speak about my own mental health and to be able to speak to other men and speak to other women and peers about mental health, it's actually just made me a more grateful person and someone who can be more reflective and someone who can prioritize the important things in my life in a way that matters.
So Gina, Adam here is echoing a lot of really, really deep research that's coming out nowadays, especially out of the Institute of Boys and Men that's founded by Richard Reeves. Do you have any sense of how do we start addressing this problem in particular?
Well, I think one big key thing is to reduce the stigma around mental health for everyone, so that it is something that we can talk about and seek support for when we need it. I think the implementation of social and emotional programming inside schools can really be transformative to give young people the tools they need to have important conversations, to know when they need help, to know when they can do some self-regulation to support themselves, but to know when I need to go seek help elsewhere. And I think in particular for males, that is difficult inside schools. And I think these are conversations that are important and critical to have, so that our boys and young men and our adult men are able to have important critical conversations that support their own mental health and well-being and across their lifetime. And so I'm really grateful for the new emerging research on this. There's so much pressure out there, especially I'm going to go back to the social media, which has really changed a lot of things for a lot of kids and boys in particular. Of course, there's issues with girls as well, but there's a lot of pressure on our young men today and our boys today, and we need to have those important conversations for sure.
Well, fantastic. And I think you kind of envisioned the next segment, which talks about why schools should be the locale for a lot of mental health support.
I spent 34 years as an educator, and I saw the tremendous deterioration in youth mental health. And when you sit with kids who are really struggling and you see the levels of anxiety and depression that exist out there, it just, as a human being, I can't not try to take action to try to help improve the lives of kids.
Essentially, my ideal case would be if schools were the place to support student mental health, as in they don't have to go to external services unless it's an urgent need. 75% of lifetime chronic mental illness develops by age 24, 50% by age 14. That means where students who are going through this are most of the time is at school. So what better place to reach them and support them than where they're spending most of their days?
So, Gina, can I have you reflect on the comments you just heard there about the importance of schools? It's obviously why you've organized the Mental Health Summit in the first place.
Absolutely. Well, as the previous people who were speaking in those clips had mentioned, school is where we can access all students, and all students are attending, and they need to learn the preventative mental health skills and strategies that will help them throughout their lifetime. And the best place to develop that is early on and continuously. And so if we can support them early, we're hoping that we can change things, like the number of 50% of kids who experience mental health difficulties have that by the time they're 14 years old. What are some of the ways that we can provide early intervention in a universal way for all kids in a tier 1 level to give them some of these tools that they need to self-regulate? Dr. Mark Brackett, who was our keynote last year, mentioned that most people don't get an emotion education on what are our feelings. In fact, there's work by Susan Davis who says, people typically identify 3 different emotions. And we need to know nuanced understanding of all the things we feel, because when we can name it, we can tame it. And that's when we can help support kids with some regulation strategies, and or when they are needing external support because it's not something they can solve themselves, we can provide them with the tools they need to articulate what they need and get them the help that they need, that they deserve and need, that's beyond themselves. And so that not just involves programming for kids, that also involves new information for our teachers, who are, the most caring people. They go into this field because they want to make a difference in children's lives. And so I think with the increasing complexity inside classrooms, we need a little bit more information and more of a strategic plan inside our schools to help support mental health, because this is something that years ago we didn't have in our strat plans, and now we all have it in our strat plans, and we need to figure out what's a way that we can address mental health for all, for the adults and for the youth in our buildings, but also to support families in the greater community. So I think schools is the most important place where we can have profound impact at an early age to provide people with the skills and tools they need to last a lifetime. And hopefully, reduce the number of people who need more significant mental health later. But if they do need help later, they'll know where to go and how to get it.
Yeah, and as I learned at the summit, and it was expressed here already, a big part of this is being able and being comfortable to vocalize what people are experiencing or what elders in the community have experienced. So here we have next some stories around folks' personal mental health.
Well, when I was 11, I was diagnosed with anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder. So it's been a big part of my life for most of my life. And just having, like I said, the awareness out there and people knowing that it does get better and you're not alone is really important and to help end that stigma.
Personally, because my daughter is gone through a lot of mental health issues and is still going through it bravely, openly. And so when you have a child who's going through it, it's more personal. But as an educator, I definitely want it to be for everyone. But yes, my own daughter is still going through mental health issues.
I've struggled with my mental health ever since middle school. I'm a 2-time suicide survivor. I've had a significant history of family mental illness. And after I finally got help and was sort of guided through how to get better myself, I very much personally saw all the failings and all the missed opportunities to get me the support before I got to this point of crisis. And I just made it sort of my life mission. I don't want to see anyone else fall into the same traps that I did.
So, Gina, there are some, really brave folks that I met at the summit. And I think we need to continue to encourage folks to be brave and share their stories. How important is it that we model for younger students and even older students that it's okay to express their feelings like Dr. Mark Brackett was discussing with us?
I think it's absolutely critical. These are stories of hope and resilience, and we will all face struggles in the course of our lifetime. And helping students learn from other people and hear their stories and know that there's going to be difficult times, but there's help for you. There's always hope, and to develop the skills to be a more resilient person. I think it's really important. I do commend all of the brave people who are out there sharing their stories. And there's certainly a lot of organizations who were involved in the summit last year. We had a youth panel, which I was really proud of. And you did have Caitlin speaking there. And she, at grade 7, was experiencing her first mental health symptoms. And I think it's really important we include youth voices. So I do want to give a shout out to jack.org and to the Alberta Adolescent Recovery Center for the brave folks that they sent up to be on the youth panel, in addition to some pre-service teachers who came up and shared their brave stories. So brave stories, whether you're young or adult, I think they are part of the narrative that allows us to build this capacity for hope and for resilience. And it's really an important part of meaningful change and building that community that we talked about. Stories are part of healing.
I love that. I think that's a wonderful note to end this segment on. Stories are a part of healing. I think that's wonderful. So, Gina, the last part of this podcast is going to be an interview we both conducted with Kim Schonert-Reichl, the final keynote that we have yet to release an interview with. And so I'm excited to release that.
Yeah, Kim has absolutely been a mentor. She's done a lot of significant research around the world. Kim is a Novo Foundation endowed chair in social emotional learning. She's on the board of CASEL, currently at the University of Illinois, Chicago, but she's a game changer globally. She advises international groups, including the OECD and UNESCO. So she's done a lot of interesting research, even research that shows that social emotional learning actually can impact students' academic performance. I know in one particular research article that I read from Oberle and team was about impacting mathematical outcomes, because when students have social emotional learning, when they're regulated in a good, safe place and feel like they're ready to learn, they will learn. And so there's so much more research that Kim does on that subject. I defer to her, and this is why we brought her into the Mental Health Summit to talk a little more about social and emotional learning and its profound impact that it has in schools.
Wonderful. And folks will hear some more from Kim and 3 of us really right now. So, Kim, thank you so much for joining the Education Matters podcast. And we have our wonderful co-host Gina here again with us, and we are in Banff at the Mental Health Summit. So welcome and thank you for joining us. Let's start with, we're obviously so excited to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about why this event is so important to you?
Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I'm so excited to be on this podcast and reach people across Canada who will be listening. So this, the Mental Health Summit is so critical. As we know now more than ever before, the mental health of our young people is especially important. We need to really address it and find ways to work together to help deal with these problems. And by bringing people from across Canada and even outside of Canada, around the world, coming together, all putting our heads together, learning and listening will really be one of the steps that we need to be able to do that. And can I just say, we're also at the Banff Conference Center, which is like the most majestic, beautiful place to be. And so the idea that we're here learning and at the same time in this breathtaking area, it's the perfect storm of bringing everything together.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And Kim, the podcast, we always start with introducing our audience to the guests in a bit of a different way. And I'd like to start with the question of where and when did you grow up? What was that like, obviously?
Oh, it's so great. So I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, outside of Chicago, about a half an hour from the downtown, in a town called North Lake, Illinois. And it's kind of a more sort of working class neighborhood. And I really, but it was very traditional in the sense that, you had a street. And at that time, as a kid, you just went and played out on the street. All the neighbors raised you, you just could go and do things and ride your bike and things like that. And it was really, and I grew up in the 60s and 70s in that area, really influential. And of course, just dealing with Chicago and the weather I remember something called the big snow that we had in, I think, 1968, that it snowed like, I shouldn't mention this. This seemed like a lot then, but like 3 feet and within like 12 hours or something. But you have a lot of snow here too. So.
Well, I'm from Toronto. It's kind of a sister city, I think, anyway, of Chicago.
Oh, it is for sure.
The lake effect snow and all that stuff. Do you remember the moment you realized you first loved to learn, or what it was that you first loved to learn?
Oh, that's such a great question. I was one of those kids who, as soon as I could learn to read, I just read everything in sight. I just remember loving to go to the library and reading books. But I also remember, so my dad was a professional, he was a children's photographer, actually, but also a really curious person. And so from the time I can remember, we went downtown Chicago to go to museums. And I probably went to the Art Institute of Chicago, one of the greatest art institutes and art museums in the world. I was 4 the first time I went. And we would go to museums almost every weekend. Museum of Science and Industry, the Field Museum, and we just spent a lot of time learning. But it was just part of our family atmosphere. So my parents both read books all the time. We went to museums. It was just really always this curiosity and learning.
That's wonderful. I'm going to turn it over to an expert to ask another expert all the meaty questions that I know the audience will be interested in. But before that, I have one more question that I always like to ask, and it is, what did you study? And this could be when you're in elementary school or high school or even early days in university, and most impacted how you think and work today?
Oh, that's such a great, right. Again, really, I think about those experiences that really shaped me. And I'll just mention one now. There's many, many, many times, but I can tell you my 8th grade language arts class, Mrs. Hepperly. And we were in a class that was advanced. I think, we read a lot, we wrote a lot. She had us write our autobiography about like who we were and who we wanted to be, which is such a important developmental milestone. When you're 13, you are already thinking about those things. But I remember her telling us that, asked us who was going to be around over the Christmas holiday. And of course, all of us raised our hand. She said, would you be interested in going to do help some people who are in an inpatient mental institution? She said, there are people, and I don't know how she knew them. She said, there are people who don't have families. They're all alone over the Christmas holidays. And we in this 8th grade class could get together and go. And so we planned on doing a show because I had been in the Christmas play. She had us come over to her apartment to make cookies. Like I'd never even been to a teacher's apartment. And then we had like our parents and stuff drove us to this inpatient mental health, facility, and be with these people for the day. And I just remember I wasn't scared. It was just like we were doing good. There were people who, and anyways, for that teacher to have that experience, it had such a profound impact on me in terms of my interest in health and well-being of people, and how do you create a sense of community in classrooms? How do you empower young people? And the power of that teacher-student relationship, that teacher who gave us this opportunity to feel like we could make a difference in the world.
That's so great. And you're not the first person on the podcast to remember not only that moment of inspiration or that subject area, but the teacher's name. And I find that just so fascinating how almost universally everyone that answers that question, or even has done anything of with any repute or success in life, remembers that teacher that started them on that journey. So I think that's a great reminder for this audience. Gina, I'll kick it over to you.
Kim, you've done so many things to promote social emotional learning in Canada and in the United States. 30 years ago, you started a lot of work around Vancouver area when you were at UBC, but it really spearheaded across the province, and even I would say trickled over into other places in Canada. Social emotional learning. Can you tell us a little bit about why social emotional learning matters to you?
Well, thank you, Gina. It's so great to be talking with you about this important topic. I began my career as a teacher. I was a middle school teacher, and then I taught in an alternative high school of kids who had all, for various reasons, had to leave the traditional high school and had more challenges learning. And after that, I went and lived and worked in a residential treatment institution for kids with severe emotional and behavioral disorders. And what I learned in those kind of formative years of my career was that how you feel affects how and what you learn. And especially the kids, of course, the 7th and 8th graders. I mean, if you think I went from 7th to 8th grade, alternative high school, to kids, there was all this, these were kids who definitely challenged you. They definitely, called you names, and there was all sorts of things that happened in those kinds of situations with those kids. But they really were ones who you learned so much of how they feel and how important their social and emotional well-being was for learning. They wouldn't, in the alternative high school, they wouldn't come to school if they didn't feel like they could be seen and heard. And so it really set the whole pathway for me to be able to really see that the importance of the social and emotional side of education, and how you feel is inextricably linked to what you learn and how you learn. Stress in fact affects your brain. So really, that's really, and so of course I'm an SEL advocate. I'm a SEL fanatic, really, because I realize how important social and emotional learning is for all of education, and should become an essential part of education in the same way that math, science, and reading, we should have SEL there.
I absolutely agree. And I've read a lot of your research, and the impact that social and emotional learning has not only on students' pro-social skills, on their emotional regulation, but also on their academics. And I think people don't always understand how it can impact student learning inside the classroom. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the research is really amazing. And over the past 2 decades, we now have a large body of research really showing that social and emotional skills are a better predictor of your life success and achievement than is IQ. We know that for sure. And we also know that social and emotional learning not only predicts your success in school, it predicts your success in life. So for example, one study found that children's social emotional skills in kindergarten, if they had higher pro-social skills, were more likely to get along and cooperate, were more likely to graduate from high school, earn a college degree, and find stable employment.
Wow.
And now there's even other research really showing that your social and emotional skills, promoting your social and emotional skills in schools not only promotes your, increases your kindness, decreases emotional distress. It also, in one meta-analytic study, found that those students in social and emotional learning programs had 11 percentile higher in academic achievement than students who weren't in social and emotional learning programs. So, there's just a whole body of research really showing these skills are durable. In fact, I just was looking at one study that showed they did social emotional learning program in elementary school. They followed the kids 15 years later and found that they had reduced mental health problems and substance abuse. And then the one last, I will just mention, there's so much research. One study I really love is, guess what? Social and emotional learning programs, so they followed the kids into adulthood. One study found that students that had them in elementary school as in adulthood, they were more likely to vote.
Wow. Wow. So being a positive, active member of your community and contributing.
Yes,
having a
exactly.
voice. That's powerful. And what do you think schools can do? Because your study that you mentioned about kindergartens or young people coming into school, we don't all have the same first 5 years experiences at home. But if we could change something in schools, we know the brain is plastic. We know the kids' minds are malleable, and we can actually practice and learn social emotional skills. So what do you recommend for the first few years of school to help support kiddos that maybe don't have the chance at home to practice a lot of social emotional learning?
Yeah.
What can we do?
Well, that is a very long podcast. It would have to be, but I will just give you a short
We can
version.
do it again, by the way.
Exactly. I think there's a couple of things. I think one thing is that we know these skills can be taught. And I think early on, really these sort of essential skills developmentally are learning that ability to self-regulate, the ability to manage your emotions, the ability to identify your emotions, to be able to make those connections, and finding strategies to self-manage, giving those kiddos those kinds of skills to be able to say, I'm feeling upset now. I need to go take a breath. I need to go and really learn how to, if I get really mad, I won't be nice to my friend. And so I really need to learn these skills. However, the one thing that I think needs to be talked about more is how do we support the teachers? Because teaching is a very stressful job. And so for children to be in classrooms and where they're learning these skills, we also need to have teachers who, number one, have these skills themselves, feel confident, and also get the support to implement these programs and practices. And the thing that we find is the majority of teachers have never had a course in teacher preparation on social and emotional learning.
Wow.
And so I really feel like if we really want to help the kids, we really have to start with the educators and start with the adults to help them have these skills in a way, and to also give them, say, now we're asking you to do this. We know you didn't get it in teacher preparation, so how can we support you, instead of sort of saying like, why can't you just do it? Anyway, So I really feel to help the younger children. But I do want to emphasize one thing is it's really, really, really important to start early with the children when they enter school. So it just becomes a way of being, and they know, by the time they get to junior high, they'll be like, oh yes, I have the toolkit of strategies to deal with when I need to self-regulate. I have good conflict resolution skills. I have ways to be more socially aware and empathic and compassionate, the skills to make responsible decisions.
Wow, that's that would be something.
Yes.
If kids had that ability to even articulate having those skills. I really agree with you on supporting our leaders, our teachers, and our leaders in schools, and supporting their social emotional learning, not only because they're the ones caring for our kiddos, but also to care for themselves. You did a fascinating study on the stress contagion. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting how that study came out. The study is called Stress Contagion in the Classroom. And it came about because I had read an article about stress contagion, another study that had looked at that. And then I was listening to the radio station one morning driving into UBC. Mm-hmm. And it was someone complaining about teachers going to get doing yoga or doing massages. And they're like, why are we spending taxpayer dollars on getting teachers to go take care of themselves? And I thought, no, we need to understand teachers are that. So I then worked with a colleague, Ava Oberly, to do a study on stress contagion in the classroom. I'd heard that emotions are contagious and that stress is contagious. Even if you're not stressed, but you're around a group of people highly stressed, you will catch it. I said, what happens in the classroom? So we went to the teachers' 4th to 7th grade classrooms, about 17 of them, had teachers complete a measure of their stress and burnout. But for the children, we decided, let's go really deeper. Let's look at their stress physiology. Wow. And so we collected their cortisol. And as you know, we collect cortisol through getting saliva. Yeah. And just, 4th to 7th graders love giving you spit. They truly loved it. No, they really loved because we would go in with a science lesson about why we're collecting your saliva and what we're going to be learning. And they were so keen. And they did call my research assistants, oh, the spit ladies are here. But we then, so we looked at their cortisol. We had the teacher stress and burnout. But what we found was fascinating. Those classrooms with the teachers with the highest levels of stress and burnout had students with the highest levels of cortisol indicative of higher stress. Wow. And so what it meant was that really, first of all, that when you have stressed teachers, you have stressed kids, really looking at that. And that really the bottom line, I think the moral of the story is if you want to help the children, you have to help the educators.
Right. One of the programs actually that you are a scientific advisor for is MindUP. And I love that program for many reasons. But one of the things that there is comprehensive training for teachers and even leaders. We've piloted a project with that program and seen after even 1 year statistically significant changes in students' attention, concentration, and focus inside the classroom. And of course, some changes in their knowledge about their own brain and about their own self-regulation and using mindfulness practices. But in that, we've also seen some changes in teachers. So can you tell me a little bit about MindUP and a little bit of the science behind that?
Well, yes, I've been involved with MindUP since it began in 2004 in Vancouver, British Columbia. It's really a Canadian program and really was influenced greatly by the work that was being done in British Columbia with the social responsibility performance standards, actually, that came out in 2000. And so the program was developed. It's very interesting. It was just briefly, the program was developed with the latest research in mind about what do we know about the brain, what do we know about mindfulness-based practices, what do we know about the promotion of social responsibility, like gratitude and kindness and things like that. And what was great about the program, so we had scientists really informing it, but then went into the classrooms and got the teachers to give feedback of how the lessons work. So the program really is a co-created program that I think that's what makes it so user-friendly because it really teachers were the ones involved. It's a program that has 4 pillars really influenced by mindfulness-based awareness, positive psychology, as well as social emotional learning and the neuroscience. It's one of the only programs I know, and maybe there's more that have followed, that actually begins by teaching children about their brain. From kindergarten or pre-K, they learn about their amygdala, they learn about their hippocampus, they learned about their prefrontal cortex. And then they learn about mindful awareness, and they also then, and they learn about mindful of the senses of tasting and smelling and movement. But after that, instead of just stopping there, and a lot of programs that are mindfulness based just stop there. They just do the mindfulness. Then after children are more self-regulated, more present, then they move to developing the other skills like social awareness. They do perspective taking. Then they practice gratitude. And then they practice acts of kindness. The middle school program actually has a whole lesson on interdependence and learning about the environment. And then they come together at the end and they do an activity for a mindful action in their community. So the science really, it's informed from the latest science of what we know of how these positive human qualities develop, and at the same time, very much from the practice of what is going to work.
I love that program, and I'm very excited because I know that they're coming out with new curriculum, so I'm excited to see what's coming up. Thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate all of this. Is there anything else that you would tell us that we could do if we had a magic wand to change the way schools are and how they look today? If you could change something, what would you change?
Well, I think, well, first of all, teachers work. I have such admiration and respect for the teachers we have and the dedication and passion they have for making a difference in children's lives. I would say I'd change a few things. One is I would give much more emphasis to helping teachers be supportive, their own well-being, caring for them, giving them the learning and curiosity and more autonomy in the classroom, and really helping them to do that. Second, and related, my dream, wish, whatever, is to have these aspects of mental health, well-being, social emotional learning embedded within teacher preparation. I wish I would have gotten that when I was prepared to be a teacher, that we just make it foundational. We did that at University of British Columbia for several years. It was hugely successful. And the next one, and this is something I think is so critical, is I really want to empower the students. You know, when I started teaching, I learned so much from my students. I just remember my I love the story. I was 7th grade students who I was teaching French to, and we had they had an exam on a chapter, and I was like, okay, what do you usually do when you do ready for exam? Well, we write sentences with the word in it. You know, several times I have to do these worksheets. I'm like, let's think of something else. Let's brainstorm what you should do to study. And it was an exam on French, like restaurant, like food things like that. And so they brainstormed and they were like, go to France and, you know, all the things they do. But they came up with having a French cafe day, of course. And then they came in and made all the menus using all the French vocabulary. Yeah. And they're like, of course, very concrete, grade 7s. Yeah. Can we also have real food? Do we have to? Yeah. And then they created this. And then I remember the day we were doing it on the Friday. I'm walking, they asked if they could get my keys to the classroom so they could set things up. I come down the hallway and I'm like, oh, they're all lined up. Like, did they get in there? And I walk up and they're like, Ms. Schonert, we're just waiting to be seated. And so they all went in, you know, we got seated. We had so much fun. We ate, they used their language, they aced their exam. And it was that experience that really taught me, you know, how much I could learn from my students. And when I gave them over the ideas, like, share with me what you think, they always came up with better ideas than I did. Always, always, always. And they were so invested. So if we could have schools in which students truly are, I mean, I'm going to go back to John Dewey, and his ideas of how do we create, you know, have our future citizens really be involved in that democracy early on in their schooling.
I love it. Thank you. One last thing is, I know as a board member of the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning for CASEL, that you have created a journal. And what I love about it is it's accessible to all. Can you tell us a little bit about your journal and how that's actually going to support teachers and also researchers?
Yeah, so it's a team. So the journal is published by Elsevier, which is one of the largest publishers in the world. It's called Social and Emotional Learning, Research, Practice, and Policy. We started 3 years ago, and it's been hugely successful. It's we have 4 sections of it: an empirical research section, a perspectives, which is kind of like overview of things, and then we have a practice section and a policy section. And so we really invite authors across a whole bunch of sectors. You don't have to be a researcher at a university. You know, we really, really welcome those. Just go online. Just if you do SEL Journal Elsevier, you'll find it. But the most important thing to me is it's fully open access. Yeah. So there are no fees to. So first of all, CASEL sponsors it. So if you're an author and you submit it and you don't have any fees to pay, your fees are totally covered, and it's accessible to anyone to download an article to go in the world. It's just free. Open.
Awesome. Just another way that you and CASEL are helping to promote social emotional learning globally. And thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Oh,
I'm going to flip the script.
Oh, I like this.
Jason, if you had a magic wand and you could change anything in school, what would it be?
So I've asked this question to every guest that I've had. And I would answer by saying, I don't think people go deep enough. If I had a magic wand, I would completely reform the education system to all the things that we know empirically are or should be part of the system. So, for example, professional development for teachers for social emotional learning, for themselves and for their kids. So that is a whole shift, right? A whole progression, I should say, in terms of PD. Kids don't need to be organized by age level. we know that's not the best way to teach. Class sizes should be reduced to at least half, probably to about a third. And I think that teachers should be given the opportunity to teach in a fundamentally different way. What I mean by that is I think co-teaching should be a thing. I think that's how we learn. Like you work in research teams, right? You mentioned your co-authors, right? And I know you do too. And this conference is an example of how we're all learning together. So this idea of teachers being isolated in a rectangle for 25 years with different class makes no sense. I think you can pair teachers based on experience, proficiency, and subject matter expertise, and do things like that we know really work well for kids, like project-based learning and inquiry-based. So thank you for asking me that question, because I've always wanted my guests to go deeper. Like, if you had a magic wand, you can really do the whole thing. So that's where I would start.
I've always been curious about your answer to that question, so thank you. I love that you talked about mentoring and team teaching, and I just want to once again say, Kim, thank you for being such an amazing mentor to me and to so many. I really think that there's a revolution going on with social emotional learning. We are really impacting kids and families. There's this wraparound solutions coming into place, and thank you for all the work you do on that. I know you've inspired myself and many of my colleagues, and we really appreciate your leadership.
Oh, thank you so much, Gina. That means so much to me. But of course, I feel it's always been us working together. And every time I go and work with someone new, I learn so much. I just really just love that collaboration, that partnership, just what you were saying, that the importance of that co-learning, co-teaching. I love that. And then it just made me think back when I started teaching how alone I was in that classroom, and how much I doubted myself so much, and it would have been so wonderful to have a mentor there. So thank you you so much.
And Gina, thank you. This is the last interview that we'll do as part of this mini series in support of the Mental Health in Schools Summit. But now that I've been here and been experiencing the entire process, has been wonderful. A lot of the folks that we've done these micro interviews with have been singing your praises for being the leader and putting this together. So thank you. And for the folks listening, this will be happening again next year, right, Gina?
Absolutely.
And so we'll do this direct to camera.
Absolutely. And Kim and I have a little announcement that we're starting a global research forum that is going to be coupled with the Mental Health Summit next year. It's a global research forum on mental health in schools in particular, and it's a way that we can bring forward some amazing work that both Kim and other colleagues have done, like Mark Brackett, who was one of our keynotes. And I want to give a shout out to Claire Crooks, who sadly we lost in the field, but who did amazing work. And so we really want to honor the work that's been done and carry this forward in Canada. We don't have an organization like CASEL that in the United States. And when we were down at the Social Emotional Learning Exchange and meeting other Canadians, and we were all like, we all have to travel here to come. We want something up here too, but we do want to be highly collaborative. I'm still always going to go to the Social Emotional Learning Exchange because it's a must-go-to conference, but this one is just another thing that we want to do, and we want to add that research component and work with people like Kim who can teach us so much.
Well, and I think the guests here will speak for themselves, and word of mouth is going to travel. This is, in my opinion, a must-go-to education conference. Never mind the specific focus. It's something that all educators, I think, need to go to. And I know you have a great number of superintendents and leaders here at this, and I hope it continues to grow. And I hope the Education Matters podcast can continue to bring people to it. So thank you both for your time. Well, with that, everyone, thanks for tuning into this special and different episode. We hope you found value in it. And I know, Gina, you want to remind everybody of next year's Mental Health Summit.
Absolutely. Again, it is April 17th and 18th in Banff at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity. Tickets will be going on sale in a couple of weeks, and stay tuned for other announcements, including call for proposals for people who want to lead a breakout session.
With that, Gina, thank you so much. You've taught me so much, and this has been a wonderful process in interviewing all your amazing keynote speakers And I hope we can continue to do this in the future.
Thank you so much, Jason. Having you as our podcast partner at the Mental Health Summit is invaluable because you are collecting stories from people who are attending, and we're learning so much more about our broader community and where we want to go with the summit. So that's a key integral part of what we're building is learning. And so thank you for being a part of it, for capturing stories. You showed a few today. I know you've captured more, but really love the partnership, and I thank you very much for that initiative. For that
Teamwork makes the dream work, Gina. Thank you.
That's right.
This podcast is recorded on the territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The show is edited and produced by the marvelous and talented Andrew Mastroianni. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, remember, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what's happening. I'm your host, Jason Bucheri. Until next time.